Hi, I'm coming to you. My name is Tiffany Tyson, and I've been doing a series that's talking about the law is deadly uh, to Christians, and only the people who are of the promise and of grace are the ones that are going to actually uh, be saved and have the promises that God has promised in the Word. A lot of this teaching is definitely in parallel with like Joseph Prince. I believe that throughout my experience, I've had an experience where I've heard two different messages from the church body, and it's just kept me in a state of fear and anxiety because when you try to do anything according to what you bring to the table and what you can do, you are focused inward and not focused on Christ. And so that focusing inward keeps you in a state of condemnation because the heart is wickedly deceitful. And that's why Jesus had to come, is because we're unable to fulfill. God says our righteousness is as a dirty rag, and I'm sure we've heard that preaching of what that rag means is actually talking about like a tampon or a maxi pad. I mean, that's what he's saying. That our works, our goodness, our good works are. So when we focus on us and what we've done and what we're trying to do, it's never enough, and condemnation always comes in. And so my rule of thumb is if it requires me, if my relationship with God requires me to get anything right, I'm going to fail because I who knows what is the standard. You read 1 hour, and then the condemnation will come and say, well, you should have read an hour and 30, or you should have did this, you should have did that. And so living in that condition is a state of constant damnation. And that's why I believe as a people we have so many mental illnesses and so divided and just dejected and just guilt riddled and sad and depressed and every other thing, because we have not chosen to put our trust only in Christ, and we're still looking at ourselves. Okay, so with that said, I'm coming to you today from Romans. I want to say this. I feel like the Lord has been leading me to speak on this. I've been at different churches for a different number of years, 6 years, 5 years, and I've just always been searching for this message of grace that I see in the Bible when I read it personally, where it talks about the grace and the abundance. And I haven't seen it. The only place that I have seen it is online with Joseph Prince, and I'm going to be starting a group where we can come together and watch Joseph Prince together, and to begin to get free by listening to his message that he has. And also we may study briefly just a chapter and talk about it. I think there's a lot of unity lacking in the church. I think we go to church, but we don't really connect with people. Only I think the people in the leadership are the ones that are actually connected. We just go in there, we say hi, and we go on about our lives, but we're suffering because we don't have that church body. We don't have that interconnectedness. And so I think that starts off with a small group of people that can be committed to sharing lives together in non-judgmental atmosphere, in an atmosphere that's also made to have an element of it where you share your social life with people in some way, in a effort, a actually like wrote down like we want to foster fellowship. And so I've seen different places and different things. Either I'll go to some churches and they'll have fellowship, but the word is not based on faith, and then I'll go to some place where they don't have the fellowship, and the word is not based on faith. It's based on a mixture of law and faith. So I feel like the Lord is calling me, and I think everybody has to do ultimately what they feel is what they need to do. So I'm just being as obedient as I can to what I believe He has put in my heart and given me the strength to do. And so that's talk about how we can get free, how we can trust, how we can believe in God's promises and stop trying to get God's righteousness by doing good works. So I'm going to direct your attention to Romans 9. I'm going to just go down to verse 10 because I don't want to make these videos very long, because I know that people's attention span can't handle a bunch of information at once, and you don't really need to know everything at once. You just need to get your daily bread. And so I'm coming in that kind of format. But if you look at Romans 9, verse 10, it says, and you can read the whole verse because all the context is there, but I'm going to just go with verse 9. It says, this son was our ancestor Isaac. Well, let's look at this. Actually, I'll go back to verse 7. Being descendants of Abraham doesn't make them truly Abraham's children. Okay, all the people who was born by Abraham is not his children. Also, paralleling with people, everybody that's in the church house doesn't mean they're the children of God. So being descendants of Abraham doesn't make them truly Abraham's children. For the scriptures say, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. Though Abraham had other children too, this means that Abraham's physical descendants are not necessarily children of God. Only the children of the promise. The promise is not of the works of the law. Only the children of the promise. So if you're talking about the works of the law, that's not of the promise. Only the children of the promise. For God had promised. He's saying the way that even Isaac was born was through a promise of God. Ishmael was not born through a promise of God. Okay, so only through the promise. I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. This son was our ancestor Isaac. When he married Rebekah, she gave birth to twins. Okay, so even though this is different from the story of Hagar and Abraham, where Abraham took it upon himself to have sex with a handmaiden that was not the woman who God had placed him with, as far as Sarah. But in this story, it was the woman who God placed for Isaac to marry. Isaac was only supposed to marry Rebekah, and Isaac only married Rebekah, who was of the promise. But Rebekah gave birth to two different things. Even though she was of the promise, there was two things in her. Okay? And we know that two things can't walk together unless they agree. But it says that so Rebekah gave birth to two children, not things, excuse me. She gave birth to twins, but before they were born, before they had done anything good or bad. So this is straight coming from God. It's not based on what the kids did. It's not based on the kids physically. It's based on the promise and what God had said before time. Okay, before they had done anything good or bad, she received a message from God. This message shows that God's chosen people, that God chooses people according to his own purposes. He calls people, but not according to their good or bad works. Okay, so a lot of times the church will preach that, that you need to do this, this, and this, and this. But that's not what the word is saying. He says that he calls people, not according to good or bad works. She was told, your older son will serve the younger son, which is in opposition to the law, because usually in the law, the older son is the one who receives the blessing and the inheritance. But he already told her through his promise he was doing something different from what the law said. He was doing a new thing. So that's why he came to her with the message that it's not going to be according to what the law says. This is something different. So in this case, I'm bringing out to the forefront the promise. Above, the promise is going to be what inherits the blessings. The promise is going to be what inherits the birthright, not the way the law does it. This is a common theme going through the Bible. The law is underneath the promise. The law was fulfilled. It says that there's nothing wrong with the law except for the fact that we can't keep it. So the law is not for us. The law was for us to realize that we can't keep it and we need God to fulfill it. We need to look to God to do, not us according to our good or bad, but according to what God said. Same thing here. He said it wasn't according to what the law said or according to their good or bad works in verse 12, but it was according to what the Lord said. In the words of the scripture, this is verse 13, Romans 9. In the words of the scriptures, I love Jacob, but I rejected Esau. So he was rejected before he was born. Are we saying then that God is unfair? Of course not. For God said to Moses, I will show mercy to who I choose, and I will show the compassion to who I choose. This is what God is saying. So it's God who decides to show mercy, and we can neither choose it nor work for it. We cannot work for God's mercy. It is given by him. So it goes on to talk about how God is the one who chooses the mercy, and some people's heart he hardens. And it also says that we have no right to say that he's wrong in this because he's the creator. That's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. You know, that God is saying in the word that some people's heart he hardens. And but that just goes to show you that it's not about you or your good works. It's just about what God has chosen, the promises that God has said. Now it says in the word that anyone can receive the promises of God, but they come by faith. But let's just go down here to what it's saying. Okay. So he goes to say, what does this all mean? The fact that people don't choose, but God chooses. It says, even though the Gentiles were not trying to follow God's standards, they were made right with God. So they were made right with God, even though they weren't doing the law. They didn't even know about the law. And it was faith that this took place. It was by faith that this took place, not by following the law. That's verse 30, Romans 30. See, really what it breaks down to is that we need to read our word, because we go to church and we expect other people to tell us what the Bible says, and that's incorrect, because they're not necessarily saying what the Bible is saying, and most of them aren't. It is most of it is telling you about the law and what you need to do, and that there's still more you need to do. You need to give this. You need to do, you need to do that. And my beef is that a lot of them are not even putting, anything back into the community in a way that we see, that we can see lives truly changed, or that we can give people the tools needed to become economically empowered and to create a lot of social justice, because their hands have been tied, because they're 501c3, the law says you cannot be politically involved, and that's a way of castrating the church. When you look back at Martin Luther King's time, he was a preacher, and he is the one who helped to lead the civil rights movement. If it hadn't been for the church getting involved in politics, those civil rights movement wouldn't have took place. And really the only thing that is actually castrating is the black church, because the white church is in the power structure. Okay, so it is the black church who is not, even though they're there and the money is there, the ability would be there to lobby and to affect black issues, but because they fear having the money taxed and losing their money to have their houses and their cars and all those things that make the leaders' lives better, but not the people's lives better. So therefore you have thousands of black people dying. You have a racial inequality and bias, and you have a system that keeps this cycle going, and with no change, when the money is there from black people, from black mothers whose children are dying, and you don't hear the church speaking on it, or the church providing funds for lawyers, or you don't see anything that actually should be going on. And it's because they're more concerned about the government not taking away the 501c3 status and then keeping the funds for themselves to use as they see fit. And a lot of the problem is because people have not spoke up in the body. They have not woken up and said, well, wait a minute. I didn't come here so you could get rich. I came here so that I could learn about the Word of God, yes. And I came here also to do God's will, which talks about justice being the sacrifice that is really God delights in. And so none of these things is happening. The only thing that's happening is the preacher's getting rich. I mean, and I was a part of the system for years, and now I'm just waking up and understanding that nothing is taking place that should be taking place. And it's painful to watch, and I just can't sit by and be a zombie. Okay, so this is about teaching that it's about grace. And this is, let me say this is not that I want to dismantle the black church, because that's not going to help either. What I want to happen is I want to see the people begin to take a more active role in what is going on with the funds, making sure some of those funds are going towards the needs of the church, matter of fact, or the needs of the people, because the church is about the congregation as a whole. And I need to see more people putting the pressure on leadership to do things as far as politically, economically. Where's the church providing scholarships so black people can start businesses? We don't need the government to do that. We sit and give our money every Sunday. People are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've even watched some documentaries that talk about how the church leaders were involved with the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. The Bible talks repeatedly about you kill my prophets. So the church leader kills the prophets. Jesus came against the church leadership because of what was going on there. So we need to begin to wake up. We need to begin to hold those leaders accountable in the church as well as in the government. And we need to get these things done. So I don't want the video to be too long. So I'm going to stop on that note. I'm going to come back and begin to still talk about, okay, well, look, let me just wrap this up, because this was talking about the law. Even though I just showed you a couple points where things were not about the law, but it was about the promise. But the people of Israel, who tried so hard to get right with God by keeping the law, never succeeded. Why not? Because they were trying to get right with God by keeping the law. This is Romans 9, verse 31. Why not? Because they were trying to get right with God by keeping the law instead of by trusting Him. They stumbled over the great rock in their path. God warned them of this in the scriptures. When He said, I'm placing a stone in Jerusalem that makes people stumble, a rock that makes them fall, but anyone who trusts in Him will never be disgraced. So tune in, because I'm going to have a day when we come together and watch Joseph Prince build a church based on social justice and get some things done. And those who resonate with this message, those people who God has called to be a part of this movement, he actually told me it was the movement of the outcast. And so those of you who are, a lot of people are leaving church because of these issues that I speak about. We need to get together and we need to do something, do some things that are ordained by God. All right. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.